Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and I give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times, so stick around. So if you remember last episode, we read Alma chapter 57, in which Helaman, who is still writing to Captain Moroni, by the way, takes back Antipara with his little band of 2,000 people, and actually they take so many prisoners at Antipara and later Cumeni that they have to send them back to Zarahemla. But when that group is heading to Zarahemla to drop those prisoners off, the Nephites that are back at the city get attacked, and actually the prisoners escape, and then that group that left comes back just in time to save the fight and save the army. So it's a very dramatic episode. A lot of miracles happen, a lot of coincidences that show God's hand. It's pretty cool. So anyways, go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already. But yeah, I think without further ado, let's read Alma chapter 58. And behold, now it came to pass that our next object was to obtain the city of Manti. But behold, there was no way that we could lead them out of the city by our small bands. For behold, they remembered that which we had hitherto done, therefore we could not decoy them away from their strongholds. And they were so much more numerous than was our army that we durst not go forth and attack them in their strongholds. Yea, and it became expedient that we should employ our men to the maintaining those parts of the land which we had regained of our possessions. Therefore, it became expedient that we should wait, that we might receive more strength from the land of Zarahemla, and also a new supply of provisions. And it came to pass that I thus did send an embassy to the governor of our land, to acquaint him concerning the affairs of our people. And it came to pass that we did wait to receive provisions and strength from the land of Zarahemla. But behold, this did profit us but little, for the Lamanites were also receiving great strength from day to day, and also many provisions, and thus were our circumstances at this period of time. So now the Nephite generals want to take back the city of Manti. They're checking off Nephite cities off their list that they're trying to retrieve from the Lamanites, and Manti is next. But the problem is, they've decoyed big armies out of their strongholds twice now, with small bands, and that will not work again. Presumably. I don't know, the Lamanites have not been shown to be the smartest of the bunch. But regardless, they can't just do that same decoy strategy again. So what do? Instead of attacking brashly, they sit back with patience and they go, we will wait for more resources so that we can attack these guys for real. But then in verse 5, it says that actually wasn't very helpful, because when they're waiting for Zarahemla to send them more people and more provisions, the Lamanites are also getting more people and more provisions, and so it's just not really helpful. They're not gaining an advantage by waiting anymore, so now they have to make a decision. And I don't know, I think it's kind of fun that this section mentions how the Lamanites have become aware of the Nephite strategy of decoy and will not fall for it again. But let's see if they do anyways. The Nephites are very clever. So anyways, let's see what happens in this chapter to regain Manti. Because again, in the entire war chapters, I've repeated this like 1,000 times, but this is very important. In any of the stories of the war chapters, there is one group or person representing Satan, and one group or person representing a righteous person trying to avoid Satan's temptations and his strategies. And so the group that tricks the other, or tries to trick the other, stands in for Satan and uses tactics that he would use. And the people that are defending against that attack, or that trick, are using tactics and strategies that we should be using in our lives, or doesn't use tactics that we should be using, whether or not they actually succeed. So anyways, let's see if we can identify who is who and what we can apply from this situation. And the Lamanites were sallying forth against us from time to time, resolving by stratagem to destroy us. Nevertheless, we could not come to battle with them because of their retreats and their strongholds. And it came to pass that we did wait in these difficult circumstances for the space of many months, even until we were about to perish for the want of food. But it came to pass that we did receive food, which was guarded to us by an army of 2,000 men to our assistance. And this is all the assistance which we did receive, to defend ourselves and our country from falling into the hands of our enemies, yea, to contend with an enemy which was innumerable. And now the cause of these our embarrassments, or the cause why they did not send more strength unto us, we knew not. Therefore we were grieved and also filled with fear, lest by any means the judgments of God should come upon our land, to our overthrow and utter destruction. Therefore we did pour out our souls in prayer to God, that he would strengthen us and deliver us out of the hands of our enemies, yea, and also give us strength, that we might retain our cities and our lands and our possessions for the support of our people. So now the Nephites are at a very distinct disadvantage, because they did get provisions and armies from Zarahemla, but it's such a small amount compared to what the Lamanites are getting. And in fact, it's very cool that in verse 8, it says that the Nephites' job at this point, in their terribly disadvantaged position, was to contend with an enemy which was innumerable. I think that phrase really drives home what the Nephites were feeling at this point in time. They were feeling like the odds were stacked so high against them. The army that they were fighting against was innumerable, and they got a piddling 2,000 men and some food. This is not gonna work. And so what I think is really important is at the very next verse, they turn to God. They realize, we cannot do this on our own. We've gotten everything that we can get from Zarahemla. They aren't going to be able to send us anything more. We don't know why. But to fill in that gap, to fill in the gap of what we need versus what we have, we are going to turn to God. We're going to pray, and we're going to use our faith to request divine help. And I think that it's really telling that that is the first place that the Nephites go. After looking for temporal assistance and finding that it's lacking, they immediately turn to God. Very, very cool. Yea, and it came to pass that the Lord our God did visit us with assurances that he would deliver us, yea, insomuch that he did speak peace to our souls, and did grant unto us great faith, and did cause us that we should hope for our deliverance in him. And we did take courage with our small force which we had received, and were fixed with a determination to conquer our enemies, and to maintain our lands, and our possessions, and our wives, and our children, and the cause of our liberty. And thus we did go forth with all our might against the Lamanites, who were in the city of Manti, and we did pitch our tents by the wilderness side, which was near the city. And it came to pass that on the morrow, that when the Lamanites saw that we were in the borders by the wilderness, which was near the city, that they sent out their spies round about us, that they might discover the number and the strength of our army. And it came to pass that when they saw that we were not strong according to our numbers, and fearing that we should cut them off from their support, except they should come out to battle against us and kill us, and also by supposing that they could easily destroy us with their numerous hosts, therefore they began to make preparations to come out against us to battle. So two things. Firstly, what God gave them in response to their prayer. He didn't say, okay, I will fix all of your problems. He said, you will be delivered if you move in faith. He gave them assurances, he gave them peace, and he gave them faith, so that they could feel confident in their determination and their understanding that God would deliver them were they to move forward in faith. And I think that it's really important to note that even though it doesn't say in these verses that their deliverance is predicated on their attacking the Lamanites, I feel like it's implied that the Nephites that are praying about attacking the Lamanites are being promised deliverance, right? And so God is saying, you will be delivered if you do what I ask, if you do what you've been told to do, if you move forward in faith and take that next righteous step, which is defending your lands and your people from oppression. That's, I think, important, you know? God requires us to move. God, in response to their prayers, didn't just say, yeah, you'll be fine. I'll just snap those armies away. They'll be gone in an instant, no problem. He said, if you attack, you will be okay. He didn't say, you'll be fine no matter what. He said, if you move forward with faith, if you take that righteous step, you will be fine. You will be delivered, and I'm blessing you with greater faith to have confidence in that fact. That's cool. God can't work with us if we're not doing anything. These Nephites know how to do, and that is why they're so successful at this point in the war. And secondly, for this section, I wanted to talk about the fact that even though in the beginning of the chapter it said that the Lamanites couldn't be fooled by the same decoy trick that the Nephites had tried before, when the Nephite army comes and camps near their borders, they send out spies, and the spies go, oh, they're actually not that big, it's fine. And then what do? They prepare to leave their city and attack. Like, really? This is just the decoy trick that the Nephites have done before with a slightly different colored hat. Like, this is basically the same, right? And so I think it's iconic that the Lamanites felt so clever for not falling for their same tricks again, but then they're falling for the same tricks again, colored slightly differently, right? Which I think is hilarious. And also it holds a lesson for us for the vigilance that you have to have, because Satan can put on different hats, you know? He can do things slightly differently, and he's not going to come at you in a textbook way. So, anyways. And when we saw that they were making preparations to come out against us, behold, I caused that Gid, with a small number of men, should secrete himself in the wilderness, and also that Tiamner and a small number of men should secrete themselves also in the wilderness. Now Gid and his men were on the right, and the others on the left. And when they had thus secreted themselves, behold, I remained with the remainder of my army, in that same place where we had first pitched our tents against the time that the Lamanites should come out to battle. And it came to pass that the Lamanites did come out with their numerous army against us, and when they had come and were about to fall upon us with the sword, I caused that my men, those who were with me, should retreat into the wilderness. And it came to pass that the Lamanites did follow after us with great speed, for they were exceedingly desirous to overtake us, that they might slay us. Therefore they did follow us into the wilderness, and we did pass by in the midst of Gid and Tiamnah, insomuch that they were not discovered by the Lamanites. And it came to pass that when the Lamanites had passed by, or when the army had passed by, Gid and Tiamnah did rise up from their secret places, and did cut off the spies of the Lamanites, that they should not return to the city. So this is the classic Nephite strategy that, ironically, the Lamanites did in fact fall for again. There is a certain amount of Nephites that kind of tempt the Lamanite army to leave their city and come and attack, and then instead of fighting back and just kind of having a battle right there outside their walls, the Nephite army runs away to pull that army further and further and further outside of their protective fortifications. And then there is a secret army, or in this case, two secret armies, Tiamnah and Gid's, that flood into the city that was just emptied out. And so this has been done before. But what I want to highlight about this one is that the Lamanites were careful. This time, instead of sending their entire army to go attack this tiny band of Nephites, they send out their spies first. And the spies count the amount of Nephites there are and say, we can handle that. And then, again, instead of just immediately impulsively attacking, they prepare for war. They prepare themselves, and they say, now that we're prepared, now that we know actually how many there are, we can attack, and we can win, and then we can go back into our fortifications. The Lamanites in this situation, they felt sure. This was not an impulsive choice. This was not a choice that was spurred on by fear like the last two were, but it was a calculated decision that was the wrong decision. And so even if we think, I can do that, I'm calculating, I've looked at the situation, I know how it's going to go, but if it's outside of your fortifications, you don't know what's going to happen. And there could be two figurative armies laying in wait to immediately take over your fortifications the moment that you leave. And you don't know about that until you try and get back in. I just think that this is an important lesson in, again, understanding that standards exist for a reason, and they keep us safe even when they don't seem that they're useful, right? Like, I'm sure that the Lamanites were like, I have a big enough army. Like, we can attack these Nephites, we can kill these Nephites, it will be easy, no problem. We have them vastly outnumbered, and we're actually prepared this time. We actually know how many there are this time. And these standards, these walls, these fortifications we have, we don't need those when we have so much people. We have so many soldiers. We're fine. But those walls, i.e. the standards that we hold, are actually so much more powerful and so much more important than any amount of numerical superiority could ever achieve. And so even if you step outside of the walls of standards and you're like, it's fine. I know what I'm doing. I feel safe. I know what's going to happen. You don't. And those standards, again, they're protective for us and for you and for everybody. If we stay in those walls, it's much harder for us to be attacked. Again, the Nephites, which in this situation are representing the tactics of Satan, they did not attack them in their fortifications. They waited for more armies before they even considered attacking them in their fortifications. And so those fortifications, those standards that they held, were very, very powerful. And it came to pass that when they had cut them off, they ran to the city and fell upon the guards who were left to guard the city, insomuch that they did destroy them and did take possession of the city. Now this was done because the Lamanites did suffer their whole army, save a few guards only, to be led away into the wilderness. And it came to pass that Gid and Tiamnah by this means had obtained possession of their strongholds, and it came to pass that we took our course, after having traveled much in the wilderness towards the land of Zarahemla. And when the Lamanites saw that they were marching towards the land of Zarahemla, they were exceedingly afraid, lest there was a plan laid to lead them on to destruction. Therefore, they began to retreat into the wilderness again, yea, even back by the same way which they had come. And behold, it was night, and they did pitch their tents, for the chief captains of the Lamanites had supposed that the Nephites were weary because of their march, and supposing that they had driven their whole army, therefore, they took no thought concerning the city of Manti. And now it came to pass that when it was night, I caused that my men should not sleep, but that they should march forward by another way towards the land of Manti. And because of this our march in the nighttime, behold, on the morrow we were beyond the Lamanites, insomuch that we did arrive before them at the city of Manti. And thus it came to pass that by this stratagem we did take possession of the city Manti without the shedding of blood. And it came to pass that when the armies of the Lamanites did arrive near the city, and saw that we were prepared to meet them, they were astonished exceedingly and struck with great fear, insomuch that they did flee into the wilderness. So now we're kind of seeing a fuller picture of what this decoy actually is like. So they're already led out of the city, and the city was already taken by Tiamnar and Gid, but they don't know that yet. And this differs from the other decoys in that when they realize that they're actually being led towards the city of Zarahemla, which is where the army of Helaman was taking them, they stopped chasing on their own. They were like, oh, I see where this is going, and I'm gonna turn back because I don't like where this is going. Which is very self-aware of them, right? They didn't dig in their heels, they didn't commit, they didn't keep chasing despite all the warning signs. They saw the warning signs and turned back. And so currently, in the Lamanites' head, they were like, okay, there was this tiny army of Nephites that we know how many there were, we're prepared to fight them, we chase them, they run a little bit too far, and we turn back. And that's fine. And that's all that they think has happened so far. And then, on their way back, they camp for the night. And the Nephite army that they were chasing beats them back to the city because they don't camp for the night. And by the time that Lamanites return to their city, it dawns on them. Their city has been completely possessed by Nephites. The guards that they left were completely taken over, and they never knew until they saw it with their own eyes. Again, in their mind, they took a calculated risk, it started going a direction that they didn't want to go, and so they turned back. That is completely reasonable. That makes complete sense. In fact, they made a lot of good decisions. But no amount of good decisions can account for the fact that they did not know that the armies of Tiamnar and Gid were there, and they did not know that the army of Helaman would race back to beat them back to the city. They just didn't know that these things would happen. They did what was reasonable. They expected what was reasonable. But that wasn't enough. And only the walls of their fortifications could have protected them from stuff that they didn't know about. Because when you're outside the walls, you are responsible for taking care of everything, whether you're aware of it or not, and that is why you're more vulnerable. But in the standards within the walls, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about everything. You just have to worry about specific things. And so that, I think, shows the power of the walls, and shows the fact that the Lamanites didn't make that bad of a decision. They weren't impulsive, they weren't led by fear. They made a decent decision based on calculated information that they were given by their spies. And yet the very fact that they still left their fortifications anyways shows that they didn't really learn anything from their previous experience with the Nephites. They thought it was some tactical error that was the problem, but the Nephites knew it was the very fact that they left at all that was the problem. They did not make a mistake besides leaving the walls. Everything else they did was completely reasonable and made sense. Yea, and it came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites did flee out of all this quarter of the land. But behold, they have carried with them many women and children out of the land. And those cities which had been taken by the Lamanites, all of them are at this period of time in our possession, and our fathers and our women and our children are returning to their homes, all save it be those who have been taken prisoners and carried off by the Lamanites. But behold, our armies are small to maintain so great a number of cities and so great possessions. But behold, we trust in our God, who has given us victory over those lands, insomuch that we have obtained those cities and those lands, which were our own. Now we do not know the cause that the government does not grant us more strength, neither do those men who came up unto us know why we have not received greater strength. Behold, we do not know, but what ye are unsuccessful, and ye have drawn away the forces into that quarter of the land. If so, we do not desire to murmur. And if it is not so, behold, we fear that there is some faction in the government, that they do not send more men to our assistance, for we know that they are more numerous than that which they have sent. So, two things about these past few verses. First of all, it says that the Lamanites ran into the wilderness, not only out of the city of Manti, but out of all the other cities that they had in that area. Maybe Manti was the last one, but regardless, the Nephites now have all their cities back in this area. So not all the Lamanite cities in the entire land, but in this specific region, they have all their cities back. But the problem is, the Lamanites have more manpower. And so, when the Lamanites possessed these cities, they had a lot of raw manpower behind their defenses. But there's a lot fewer Nephites, and now they have to defend a lot more cities, because they just got a lot of cities. But, even though they're spread so thin, and even though the Lamanites could probably easily take back a bunch of cities, it says in verse 33, "But behold, we trust in our God, who has given us victory over these lands." So they're like, we did the righteous step. We moved forward, we trusted in God, and we did get our lands back. And now we will continue to trust in God about the fact that we need to defend these lands. So they aren't only trusting God once, they're continuing to trust him, which is actually something that I mentioned last chapter. So very, very cool. And secondly, it's kind of fun because these last couple verses kind of speculate about why they didn't get more strength from Zarahemla. And it's kind of funny because Helaman says in his epistle to Moroni, which is this entire chapter, he's like, first of all, we know that Zarahemla has a lot more people than they're sending. And so either you're really, really busy militarily in that area and you're really just struggling, in which case we don't want to complain because you need those armies just as much as we do. But also they say, well, there might also be a faction in the government that's not sending us the money. So regardless, we really don't want to complain about how much armies we're getting because we're going to assume the best. We're not going to assume that it's malicious. We're just going to assume either the armies are being used or some malicious faction in the government is taking over and not sending more armies. I just think it's kind of a fun outlook that Helaman has. He's like, yeah, we should have gotten more people, but we aren't going to immediately blame Zarahemla for it. We're going to take other options into consideration, and we're also going to let them tell us, if we ever do understand why that happened, or we're not going to assume the worst. Like, it's just kind of a fun mindset. He's like, yeah, it was a bad thing that happened. We should have gotten more armies from Zarahemla. But again, it could not be their fault. He's not jumping to conclusions and yelling at Zarahemla for not sending them more armies, foreshadowing for a chapter that actually happens pretty soon. But what he does do is, again, he assumes the best. And so I feel like that's a very Christ-like mindset to give. When someone doesn't act the way you expect them to, or that you think they should, instead of saying, wow, they're a bad person, what you can instead say is, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they are kind of off today. Maybe they just need someone to love them. Maybe they need a hug. Instead of immediately saying, gosh, they're awful, you know? Behold, this is the 29th year in the latter end, and we are in the possession of our lands, and the Lamanites have fled to the land of Nephi. And those sons of the people of Ammon, of whom I have so highly spoken, are with me in the city of Manti, and the Lord has supported them, yea, and kept them from falling by the sword, insomuch that even one soul has not been slain. But behold, they have received many wounds. Nevertheless, they stand fast in that liberty wherewith God has made them free. And they are strict to remember the Lord their God from day to day. Yea, they do observe to keep his statutes and his judgments and his commandments continually. And their faith is strong in the prophecies concerning that which is to come. And now, my beloved brother Moroni, may the Lord our God, who has redeemed us and made us free, keep you continually in his presence, yea, and may he favor this people, even that he may have success in obtaining the possession of all that which the Lamanites have taken from us, which was for our support. And now behold, I close mine epistle. I am Helaman, the son of Alma. So, this epistle from Helaman that we've been reading for, I think, 3 chapters now, is finally to a close. I love how he ends it by wrapping up and saying, these stripling warriors, this army that I've been working with, they're amazing. And they are very strict, not only in obedience, but in remembrance to God about what he's done for them and his importance in their life. And also I like the line in verse 40 which says, they stand fast in that liberty wherewith God has made them free. That's kind of awesome. They attribute even their own liberty and freedom to God. They attribute everything to God, and that is such a lovely perspective to hold. It really makes life itself seem more miraculous. So anyways, all in all, a very interesting chapter. This is, and counting, our 3rd decoy strategy done by the Nephites successfully. Almost the same as the other ones, but different in some very important ways. So I hope that you found something new about this story. And yeah, I definitely did. I think it's definitely an interesting strategy that the Nephites pull, and it can teach us a lot about what to avoid. So anyways, good times. So the standout verse for this chapter is going to be verse 37, which says, but behold, it mattereth not. We trust God will deliver us, notwithstanding the weakness of our armies, yea, and deliver us out of the hands of our enemies. So this is after Helaman is kind of speculating about why they didn't get more armies from Zarahemla, and basically this is the end of his thought. He goes, yeah, maybe this and this and this happened, maybe this happened, but in the end, we know that God will deliver us. Even if our armies are small, God will deliver us. And I just love how he starts the verse by saying, it mattereth not, because he's like, yeah, we could have gotten more armies, but in the end, God's got us. God has promised us that we will be delivered. And so really it doesn't matter how many armies that we have, but it matters that we move forward in righteousness and in faith. And that, I think, is Helaman's focus, and that is why I love this verse. May that apply in our lives as well. May we focus most of all on faith and have everything else take a back seat to it. Because in reality, that is what's most important. So yeah, that is the episode for today. I hope you enjoyed. I certainly did. I love a good stratagem. And that was all this chapter was. So good times. So there's just a few links down in the show notes that I want to quickly go over. Firstly, there is a let me know what you learned link, so if you want to shoot me a message and chat about something Book of Mormon related, or just, express your appreciation for the show, you can do that there, or you can DM me on Instagram. Either way. Next, there are a handful of links to access a digital copy of the Book of Mormon, so if you don't already have your own copy, but if you want to read along, or find a chapter, or create a study plan, that is where you can do it. Next, there's a quick support the show link, so if you want to shoot me a few dollars and support what I do as an independent podcast creator, that would be lovely and very appreciated. Next, we are on YouTube, so if you're not already watching on YouTube, you can find the podcast there twice a week and also a little bit of extra content, so good times. And finally, we are on Instagram, so if you want to go where I'm the most active, you want to follow me there. I post story updates, I post trivia, I post reels, and all in all, it is a lovely time, so I'll see you there. But yeah, that's all I've got for you today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.